Hello everybody, my name's Zara J, and I'm the author of Free Drifter from Hilwei as well as the London Cases series. I am a self-published author who has put in queries to book publishers, but as of right now, no luck there. As of right now, my books are available on Amazon and Bookpatch. And I wanted today to read the first chapter from Free Drifter from Hilwei in sort of preparation for the book launch that I have for my latest book. It comes out in 104 days, 17 hours, 35 minutes, and about 30 seconds. It is the Colombian Scheme. It's the third book in the London Cases series. And yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit of my latest project, the latest one that came out, with you guys in case there was any interest. I'm going to be reading from my screen because this was actually an earlier version of the book, and there have been a few changes since then. So I'm going to read it off my screen. But just know it is available in paperback and ebook. So, yeah. Chapter 1, Sweet Dreams. It was near impossible for Linda's lungs to acclimate to the freezing sensation of Ortera's thin atmosphere. It took several laps of her tongue over her alien lips to regain the ability to take a breath. She found, once finally free to notice anything, that she was crouched in a thin, in-ground cave just wide enough for her body and slight motion, a sight that might have worried her if this had not been a lifelong, weekly occurrence. She stood from her crouched position and squeezed her webbed fingers and toes a few times to get a feel again for what her Tironi, dark violet flesh moved like. Her arms were pipe cleaner thin, and her legs weren't much meatier. A creature on Earth with such little muscle definition wouldn't possibly have been able to crawl, let alone stand. But in Linda's dreams on Ortera, Tironi could easily jump 8 times their height without even a running start. This was how she got out of that sleeping hole. She squatted just barely and then straightened her legs, forcing herself gracefully out of the hole. The much bigger cave she found herself in was the rest of a Tironi home. Tironi homes were all holes and thus lit primarily with cool teal lights that lined the walls, standing in for the natural light blue glow of the sun. The lights in the cave were on, and knowing that Tironi were also sticklers for energy conservation, they wouldn't leave the lights on for the possible awakening of Linda. She was arriving in the morning, and someone was home. Tironi homes didn't consist of separate rooms, just wide holes with smaller holes for sleeping. What primarily segmented homes was furniture, much of which was carved out of the cave. Not movable, but surprisingly comfortable due to Ortera's crust being a spongy rock full of pores. In front of her was the familiar fire oven, which, based on the heat of the hole, was on. She stretched her limbs still stiff from the long sleep. A particularly loud crack emanated from her shoulder, and a yelp erupted from the next room. Before she could say a word, Fodic's head popped out from around the corner of the oven. She knew it was Fodic from his light purple eyes and gray stripes that ran vertically down his wrinkled neck. "Greetings, Linda. How was your sleep?" he said chirpily, disappearing again, getting back in his oven. She walked over to him and found that in his hands was a large bowl of glenach, a Tironi delicacy comprised of Ortera's predatory worm species. She'd had it once, but her still human sensibilities kept her from enjoying it as much as Tironi's hatred for gills gave them joy in eating them. "Very busy. School is getting harder and harder every week," She said this even knowing Tyrones didn't have school. She wasn't sure why characters in a dream wouldn't have her level of knowledge, but she couldn't resist trying to trick her subconscious into acknowledging its omnipotence. Fotish didn't comment, used to Linda's odd stories, and showed the glenach to Linda, offering her some. "No thanks, Fotish," she said, unintentionally making a face of disgust at the soupy, mashed worm meat sliding around the bowl. Fotish turned around, looking at Linda with his narrow purple eyes in a seemingly insulted way. "I wish you could warn me when you come around. I actually had made plans to meet with another friend today." "If I could, I would." Linda couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the creatures in her dreams, figments of her overactive imagination, always speaking as though they lived their whole lives and made plans while she was awake. Some nights she would appear in Vronto, where her friend Reno gave her grief for avoiding her responsibilities before proceeding to hand her a list of chores. Other nights she would have her friends in Latku telling her Yatiftu, their god, had been keeping them abreast of her daily struggles on Earth. It actually surprised her how much she was able to remember activities in the real world, even while in the middle of REM. However, Linda made the most of visiting Fotish. She felt she most needed his Tyrone love for relaxation and play over work after long days in the real world. She shrugged when Fotish informed her that he had already made plans. "Mind if I join you?" Fotish chirped in excitement, and the matter was settled. He lifted the bowl to his lips and lapped it up, his long tongue scooping bits at a time. The Tyrone, as a species, did not care to speak of business. Those with important roles in society did it without much fuss and finished up so fast that few kids ever knew their parents did work. Linda and Fotish did not need jobs on Alterra, at least not those of which she was aware. So when she visited Alterra, the two of them spent the whole time hanging out together in the way that Tyrone teens did. Fotish and Linda walked to the doorway and aligned themselves with the hole above them. Fotish led the way, squatting and then bouncing in one motion up about 4 times his height, out into the wider outside world of Alterra. The only time the sky there was ever a dark blue was midday, so the fact that it was a few hours from sunset meant that the sky of Alterra that Linda leaped into behind Fotish was completely clear and provided the full array of stars and edges of the galaxy. The commune in which Fotish and his kinship lived was settled in one of the many crater valleys of Alterra. The buildings all had light fixtures that blinked bright orange all day, every day. In a pinch, they were good for giving Tyrone an idea of how far they were from the structures, and at night, they were the only way of ensuring they didn't stray too far from their homes. Linda followed Fotish up the route to the top of the northern side of the valley, whereupon a temple of the Tyrone's god Yarol stood. Beside the temple was Flaru, Fotish's friend and a person Linda was familiar with. Flaru had the typical skinny body of a Tyrone with a variation of neon green eyes and a tendency to walk on 4 legs instead of Fotish's typical 2. "Hello, Linda," said Flaru, her voice throatier due to her swollen neck. "Are you joining our trip up north? My father says there's a commune there with a weird fruit." "Yes." Flaru was a nice enough person, and she was always up for a bit of exploring. The 3 of them set off walking, but right as she was striking up a friendly chat, Linda got an odd but familiar feeling in her stomach. Faintly, like a ghostly whisper, Rovis's voice spoke to her. My friend on Yaffle wants to talk to me," Linda said dejectedly. "I'm sorry, I'll be right back." Fotish laughed. "Take your time. The walk to the northern commune is a long one. We'll carry you as we go." Flaru didn't say anything, but glanced at Fotish in a way that Linda suspected was disapproval at being volunteered to help carry Linda. Linda chirped in agreement and closed her eyes, trying to concentrate on Rovis's location. She sometimes struggled to transfer in the middle of a dream, having to focus on the distance between where she was and where she wanted to be. It was easier when someone was speaking to her, and thankfully Rovis said plenty enough to get her there. Rovis, a short red creature with beady black eyes and no neck, as was standard of his species, was shaking Linda as she arrived in her full body. They were standing on the moon of Yaffle, the black hole nearby looming bigger than Linda had ever had a chance to witness. She could feel it gently pulling at her, like a tug from an invisible rope. She would have been startled to be there, considering the moon of Yaffle was not where she'd last been in her full body, if not for the fact that this body was almost never where she had last left it. Rovis was an odd creature, preferring the company of Linda's inanimate body to live friends. This meant that when Linda was not present to move herself, he would just take her with him in a special sack he made for housing her. She didn't mind because it was all made up anyways, and Rovis was fun enough when she was awake. "What are we doing here?" Linda asked, her eyes unable to focus on anything but the ominous black hole. "This box was just laying here, chained up like it contained something valuable. It feels heavy. I have no clue how to open it." Rovis showed her a tiny yellow chest like one might find in a pirate-themed fish tank, with small, almost necklace-like blue chains with a matching blue combination lock on the front. Linda turned it over and shrugged. "It looks like it needs a combination to open." It had 3 slots with symbols that unnerved her because of how human they appeared, not like the strange things she saw all over the place in her dreams. She rolled the cogs round a little, getting a feel for their mechanisms. Rovis kept talking beside her, but the more she turned the cogs, the more into it she became. Lucidly, a feeling of recognition came over her, and her fingers began to be guided through them. The first letter felt right when it set to Chi. She was almost giddy as it fell into place with a satisfying click. Then she played with the second dial until it softly ticked when set to She. Finally, she heard a click when the final cog was set to Stigma. She almost chuckled at how silly it felt to believe she could just randomly guess the combination from a weird letter system. She looked the combination lock over one last time and looked at Rovis, who at some point had realized Linda wasn't listening and instead had stood there gawking at her. "Is that the combo?" he asked softly. Linda shook her head. "Probably not. It would be an amazing coincidence if it was." But even so, she let her fingers stroke the edge of the lock, and then, before thinking, she pulled it apart, amazed at how the chain slipped off the box and gently fell to the ground of the moon. Upon impact, the box flung open, and a bright yellow light sparked and vanished before Linda or Rovis could blink. All that was left in her hand was an empty yellow box. She tipped it over and found that nothing had fallen out. "Did the yellow light get pulled in by the black hole?" Rovis asked. Linda looked up at the black hole inquisitively. "I couldn't tell. It all happened so fast." She handed Rovis the yellow box. "I'm sorry I lost it." He shrugged. "That's all right. Thanks for coming to help." "Sure thing. I'm gonna leave, though. I was in the middle of something." Rovis said it was fine. Linda closed her eyes and concentrated on getting back to Ortera. Her bodies, as she was informed, usually went rigid when she transported, so there was little chance this body would fall when she left. She also wished that next time she visited Yaffle, the location wouldn't be quite as freaky as beside a black hole. When she was back, Fodish and Fleru were holding slices of a melon-looking fruit to their faces. "Ah, just in time. Taste!" Fodish pointed to a slice that had been on her belly. "How long was I out?" Linda asked. disappointed that her being gone for only a minute seemed to have put them out so much. Doesn't matter. Eat. Go on. Without warning, Linda felt a gentle nudge on her shoulder. She reflexively moved her head to look at the motion, and her eyes opened to help her see better. Bent down over her, hand on her shoulder, was her best friend, Melissa. She was dressed in a spaghetti-strap yellow dress that Linda felt highlighted her brunette hair and peachy skin beautifully. Her wavy hair was clearly not brushed, but even bedhead made it bounce and frame her freckled face as though with some level of purpose. I'm sorry to wake you, but we need to get ready if we want to make this open house in time. Linda groaned and rubbed her eyes, her hands not violet like on Dortera, but the human color brown, courtesy of her mother being black and her father native Peruvian. They were in a room that was only faintly familiar to Linda, which made sense considering she'd only barely become acquainted with the motel room the previous night before she drifted to sleep. I didn't even get a chance to eat some of the fruit or say goodbye to Fodish, Linda said with a sigh. Melissa chuckled a little at this. You and those dream friends of yours. I'm gonna go fix myself in the mirror. Be back in a second. Linda nodded and made a few motions as though getting out of bed, but when Melissa was around the corner, she laid down, closed her eyes, and was briefly on Artera again. I need to go. Linda handed her piece of fruit to Fodich, who looked dejected. I figured, Fodich said, patting her head. Always trying to follow her friend's customs without being awkward, Linda reached over and rubbed his in return. Before leaving once again, she caught out of the corner of her eyes a small streak of yellow in the sky. It was moving slowly, at least from her perspective, and she smiled. It was kind of cool that her dreams had continuity. With that, she opened her eyes and jumped out of bed. Thank you all for listening to this first chapter from my book. If you are interested, as I said, it is available on Amazon and on BookPatch. You could also visit ZaraJday.com, and the full list and links to all of my books is available there. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your year, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.